This evening, I'm joined by Donald Findlay, QC, a man who needs no introduction, I am sure, to our audience. Donald, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I take it from that I'm not getting an introduction then.
Well, you will get an introduction. I should say that Donald and I usually record every month. I am very grateful to him, and that we record for the Scottish Criminal Law Channel normally, where Donald gives his wisdom and insight and experience to criminal practitioners about the intricacies and challenges of life at the criminal bar. And there's probably no one better placed to give such advice. But this month, Donald has kindly agreed to join me on the Shaping Your Success channel, where we look at things in a slightly different way. A channel which is designed to bring in different types of thinking and to maybe challenge the legal profession. So Donald is now in the 46th year of practice. I think we agreed in a previous recording.
Regrettably, that is an accurate statement. Yeah.
And you have seen it all and done it all, and you are, again, we've had this discussion, possibly the most instructed homicide defence counsel in the UK and possibly the world, but certainly tremendously experienced, and you have seen it all in your legal career. The question I was hoping to ask you this evening was, what is a legal career really all about?
It is an interesting question. And when you reflect upon it and look back, it's quite clear to me that it's all about money. Big houses, fancy cars, yachts in the Mediterranean, travelling first class, staying in the best suite in the Savoy and all the rest of it. That's what it's all about. And at every turn, my career has been a wretched and miserable failure. Just the one thing it's never involved, for me at least, has been big houses, fancy cars, yachts and all the rest of it. There are no doubt some of my colleagues across the profession in this country and abroad have become very, very wealthy from legal practice. And that's fine, provided they do what they should be doing, and that is looking after the people they represent and putting them first. To me, that is what a legal career is about. People only come to when they really have a problem. You know, people might feel sad, they might feel down, they might feel depressed. They will go and see a doctor, even though they don't really have any medical condition. They just need somebody to talk to. But people only come and see a lawyer if they really have a problem. And at that point in time, it is your job as a lawyer to take on that problem and get the best outcome for the person who is your client. That may not be the outcome they want or even hope for, but your job is to put them and their interests first. And to me, that is what a legal career is about. And I think I can say with some degree of honesty, that really is what my legal career has been all about, has been trying to do the best for each individual client.
Yep, thank you. The question that leads on from that is, why is it important for a lawyer or lawyers to be fearless and independent?
Well, you have to be independent, because the one thing you can never do is give advice to a client or to any other lawyer that is for primarily your benefit or your advantage. Everything you do must be for the benefit of the client, against also the background of the duty that you owe. If you're going to be a court practitioner, you have a duty to the court, and that's a duty of being completely honest and straightforward at all times. And if you're going to find yourself appearing in court, the one thing you must do is have the ear of the court, so that when you say something, the court can confidently accept that it is right and it is true and it is as accurate as it can be. And sometimes you may, in effect, need a favour from the court. Something may have gone wrong, you just not been able to get something ready. And if you go to the court and say, look, I have messed up here, I was going down one road. I realised it's the wrong road. I've changed my mind, and now I need time to put this right. Then my experience is that if you are straight with the court may say, well, this is very unsatisfactory, Mr. Findlay, but if that's what has to be done, then that is what will be done. So it's all based fundamentally on honesty. You've got to be honest with each other. You've got to be honest with the people you represent, and you've got to be honest with authority, and that's the court. But your client expects you to fight for them, and that is what you do. And if you are going into battle in a court, the one thing you are always entitled to do is, whether it's a wig and gown or just a gown, if there's been a problem, you go into court and you kick up hell. And you keep kicking up hell until somebody listens and somebody does something about it. That's what the court is there for. It's there to deal with problems. It's there to try and bring justice, to put situations right as best as it can. And if the people representing the parties involved are not going to go in there and fight, then who is going to represent the ordinary person? Now, you could be a perfectly ordinary individual with very little resources, nobody on your side, a story that seems highly improbable, and yet it is true. And you're entitled to some form of recompense, damages, or whatever. Or you're accused of a crime and the evidence is, on the face of it, overwhelming. What do you want happens when you go to see a lawyer and say, well, I'm very sorry, but no, nothing we can do about it? And the person said, well, tell me, this, I did not do this, or this happened to me, or I'm telling you this is true. Well, I say to any of my colleagues, who the hell are you or I to decide what is or is not true? You investigate it, you look at somebody, because that's your job. That's what you're there to do as a lawyer. And clearly, if it's demonstrated from the evidence, the story you're being told is impossible. I'll go back to the example we may have talked about before. In the days when people used to rob banks, if I had a client whose fingerprints had been found within a bank vault, then it really told me one of two things. He was either a safe maker or a safe breaker, because he didn't work for the bank. So why else would he be in the vault? And if he couldn't establish he was in fact a safe maker, then you really had to give him some pretty clear advice. But beyond that, the quality of the evidence, the veracity of the evidence, that is not my job. My job is to make sure that the person sitting in front of me gets the best possible legal representation. And you can only do that if you are prepared to maintain a level of independence. And when it comes to the bit, you're prepared to go in there and fight with every single hurdle and every single obstacle that comes your way.
This content will be watched by young lawyers, new entrants to the profession, and they may have some fear of challenging authority, but there are times when, to serve the interests of their client, they have to do so. What advice would you give to those who are at early stages around how they navigate the challenges of taking whoever it is to task to ensure that their clients are looked after?
I think I was probably about 4 years old when I discovered I didn't like being told what to do by anybody. And I've never liked being told what to do. And if anybody tells me you have to do something, then I will ask a very simple question. Why? Why have I got to do that? And if the answer is a good reason, then I will do it. I'm not going to be told to do something just because somebody somewhere thinks it's a good idea, or some petty bureaucrat dreams up a rule, or some politician comes up with a policy, so-called, which is just nonsense from beginning to end. No, I'm not going to do what I'm told. I'm going to be awkward. I'm going to be thrown. I'm going to be difficult. I'm going to upset people. because you should never be told what to do and accept it without question. When you go into the legal profession, you've got to be prepared to stand up to anything and everyone that comes your way. And the way that you enable yourself to do that is you do your homework. You understand your case. You identify the problems involved. You know the other side's arguments better even than you know your own. You understand what is coming your way. So whenever a point is made to you, you can say, yeah, I know that, but that's not right. The answer is. So much of it is preparation. You then have confidence in yourself and what you do. Because if you have done your research, if you have prepared the case, there's no reason to fear what's about to happen. Always about go into a law library and look at the row upon row upon row of session cases, Scots Law Times or whatever. In 95% of these cases, there were two sides who thought they were right, but only one of them was. So you won't win all the time. And never, ever be bullied. Not by a colleague, not by a judge, not by a prosecutor, not by the other side, not by your boss. Never let anybody push you around. Never let anybody tell you what to do. And if you want 3 fundamental principles to guide you, never explain, never complain, and never apologise.
Fantastic advice. You referenced preparation. Again, you have spoken to me before about, I was going to say, taking an interest in other disciplines. It's more than taking an interest, it's having an intricate knowledge of, for example, forensic medicine, so that when you are cross-examining or instructing reports or cross-examining expert witnesses, that you also understand the material. And I wonder if perhaps you could advise our audience about that, about looking beyond not just the law, but into other disciplines and learning them and learning from them.
As a lawyer, your client is entitled to assume that you know the law in the area in which you are working. He may not, or she may not, expect you to know the intricacies of medical matters, of technological matters, whatever it is. That's the bit you have to learn. Because it's not just about the law, it's about the law and the way it applies to practical matters. And if you don't understand the practical matters, then how can you make the law work for you? Because the two are totally linked. There's a wonderful example of how not to do things. Going back a number of years, there was an action for damages in the Court of Session that involved a piece of machinery. And the defenders, being the company with all the money, decided that they would have a working model of this piece of machinery constructed and brought into court. And this was done, and it was a fantastic thing. And lots of people came just to watch this. Anyway, the point of the story is that the defence experts who built this machine, while demonstrating to the court how it worked and couldn't have caused the accident to the worker, jammed his hand in the model in exactly the way that the worker had described. His hand got caught in the machine. Now, who's at fault for that? The lawyers were at fault for that. Because if you had understood what was happening and looked at this model and seen this model working, you ought to have asked every question under the sun, but one very simple one is, prove to me that you can't get your hand trapped in this model. In fact, Mr. Expert, go and stick your hand in the model and just let's see what happens. And of course, the expert's going to say, well, I'm not doing that. So it is understanding, and it's having the confidence, Ali, to take these things on. Don't be arrogant about it, and don't be overconfident. But you do need to be prepared to enter into the world that you're going to be involved in terms of a case or a trial or whatever, and understand the technology that's involved. Now, that could be medical matters, it could be science, it could be whatever. And you can go to experts and you will get advice from experts, but you have to understand what they are telling you. You don't just bring somebody and put them into court and say, explain this, because that's not the way. That won't work. You've got to be able to take them through it and relate it to your case. Now, by all means, of course, you can do the act that I've been doing for many, many years, and I don't understand this. I'm just a boy for Cowden Beath, you know. I am only a lawyer, and you can do that, and you use that to your advantage. Because when people think you don't really know and you don't understand, it's surprising the odd bits and pieces of information they will let slip or let you know. There is a story of a trial that was taking place in the High Court when we were in Ingram Street in Glasgow. And on the Friday, the advocate deputy came to counsel who was defending this chap on the murder charge, I think it was, and said he had an expert witness who had been at the casualty department when the deceased was brought in, and had done various things to try and save his life, but the chap died. And they wanted to bring him up to give evidence on Monday morning. He was now working in London, and could he come back to get back to London later that day? And counsel said yes, he didn't think there'd be any problem, that he would make it for the 1:30 shuttle or whatever it was. So the doctor from London came in, gave his evidence, and defence counsel got up and began to ask him one or two questions. And the main area that defence counsel was interested in was a coagulopathy. Now, coagulopathy, some will know, some won't know, is if you are, for example, stabbed and there's heavy bleeding, you would get a blood transfusion, but you don't have the necessary clotting factors, your blood doesn't clot, and you begin to bleed from every source internal, and you die from blood loss. And counsel asked his doctor something about coagulopathy, and he said, well, there's not much point in me answering that question, is there? And counsel said, well, why not? He said, because you wouldn't understand, you're only a lawyer. Well, at that point in time, the judge put the top on his fountain pen, he put it on the desk, he pushed his chair back a bit, almost put his feet on the bench and pulled out the Times crossword, because the doctor did indeed get the 1:30 shuttle back to London on the Wednesday. He was kept there all day on the Monday, the Tuesday, and the Wednesday morning. And at the end of it, defence counsel was able to say, thank you very much, and for bearing in mind that I'm only a lawyer. And he looked across the court and said, Mr. Findlay, I think I got the point.
Yeah. There's a lot of learning in that story, and much to digest. Can I ask you this as a closing question, please? What's the best piece of advice that you have ever been given or would give?
Oh, that's an easy one. It was a story that was told to me long time ago. And it was when Alec Douglas Hume was the Prime Minister. So that was in the 1960s. And there was to be a dinner in Downing Street. Now, the dinners in Downing Street's not that big, although it's bigger than it looks in terms of holding a big dinner. It wasn't that big. And I think, if I remember correctly, there were to be about 80 odd people at it. But they were kings, presidents, potentates, I mean, the highest of the high. And the civil service could not, for the life of them, work out the seating position. What was the plan going to be? I mean, was the King of Romania more or less important than the Sultan of wherever it was? And they didn't know. So the cabinet secretary said, look, I will go and see Alec Douglas Hume. Alec's a toff. He will know these things. So he went into the cabinet room, the big cabinet table. Douglas Hume was sitting, working at it. Cabinet secretary explained the whole thing, all the papers, all the possibilities. And Douglas Hume looked at them and just scooped them all together, put them in a pile, and handed them back to the cabinet secretary. who said, Prime Minister, seating plan? And Alec Douglas, who apparently said, those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. And that's advice that I have followed for all my legal career and beyond.
Yeah. Fantastic tale. Much insight. Thank you so much, Donald,
Thank you again.
for being such a fantastic guest and joining me on the Shaping Your Success channel. I'm sure our audience will ponder greatly on everything that you've outlined tonight. So thank you very much, and take care.
You too. It's always a pleasure. Bye now.